Dumelang Bahaitsu, my name is Thapelo Palane and welcome to episode 2 of Life the Docuseries. On today's episode, we are talking all things Rainbow Nations, from the cultures, traditions, heritages, and the misconceptions. So our guests today are 5 beautiful ladies, all from different backgrounds, here to talk to us about their own cultural experiences. So get your drinks ready, get your popcorn ready, and let's go meet the ladies.
Awusheni, vito ra mina I Shongitiko Mabaso, ni Mutsonga.
Hi, my name is Kate Mulligan. I have a lot of backgrounds as I'm adopted.
Hello, my name is Yuthika Irvanti and I am an Indian.
Avuxeni, rivito I Gavaza Nwakativa Nimchangani.
Sanibonani, igama ukhanyisile sibonga uNtuli, Sompisi, Mbele, ngumZulu.
How do you guys feel about this topic and the conversation that we're about to have?
Yeah, no, I feel like it's important to have cultural conversations, especially as a South African. I feel like we should be talking about other people's cultures and learning about other people's cultures. It's very important to me.
Regarding that, do you feel like there's a lot of representation-wise? Do you feel like we have enough representation? Like as a Zulu person, I feel like my culture is pretty known, but I feel like it kind of not overshadows, but
Overshadows.
yes, yeah. Other cultures don't really get that, as much as we do, if that makes sense. Do you guys feel the same way about your own cultures?
I don't know.
Okay, so I'm Tsonga or Shangan, and I was born in October of 1990. So, contextually, I was born a few months after Nelson Mandela came out of prison. And this is South Africa about to experience a new reality, right? It being an open country, in being a global country. And then, being Tsonga is being the black people of black people, because we're the most stereotyped, denigrated, and just basically seen at the bottom. Okay, so I grew up in a neighborhood where being Changani was you were teased because we stereotypically have dark skin, and the colors of my culture are super bright and make no sense to anyone with perfect color eyes, you know what I mean? But then you have someone like Shoma Josie, who's a huge cultural figure in the world, right? But she comes along in the last 3, 4, 5 years and she's brilliant. But she's not the type of brand of Tsonga, because she is mixed race and she's a hybrid of culture, right? But before that, I grew up understanding that because I was in Changani, I had to assimilate to all the cultures that were around me. So in my suburb, there were Zulu people, there were Xhosa people, there were Sotho people, and everyone knows that my Changani are the breed of people in the country who speaks everyone else's language. I speak Xhosa, I speak Sotho, I speak Zulu, and many other languages. But that's because I understood very early on that my culture was kind of stigmatized, no one really gets us, and so my experience was assimilating, right? And my culture also kind of changed when at 10 years old, was taken to a French school by my parents, right? And next thing I was going to school with kids from North and West Africa and Europe, because my first language became French. So now I'm Tsonga, but European and Senegalese, Gabonese, Congolese. And so I feel the exposure automatically kind of gives you that exposure, but I think to be black also means to be decultured, because you kind of have to pay to be global when you're black, right? You can never really have your culture for yourself. In order to learn English, in order to be more global, there's a part of you that I feel has to die. And I only started to come to terms with the fact that in Changani, after I traveled the world and went to school overseas, to say, oh my gosh, the world is kind of whitewashed and culture is still very mainstream European, and the only thing that you have as like an African or a black person in South Africa, if you're not trying to lead with the fact that you're black is your culture, right? So that was like my experience of being Tsonga, but also being like multicultural, or Pan-African actually, that's the word, Pan-African. So this is the best I can do. It's like this. I'm just like from Kenya because I really like I'm everything. I really feel like I'm everything.
You left it a lot. You just took a piece everywhere you went.
Yeah.
And it shaped you.
Exactly.
But it sounds like you had a very nice journey. I won't even lie. I wish I was more out there in terms of culture. Like growing up I feel like I wasn't really exposed to a lot of different cultures, like the way but then you had to, because you felt like people wouldn't see you if you didn't necessarily speak in their language or you spoke in your home language.
Yeah.
And honestly speaking, I wish it wasn't like that, because I would love to speak anything outside of just Zulu. Like I dabble in Tswana here and there. I can hear what they say, but it's not as interesting as being able to be like, oh no, but let's have a full-blown conversation in whatever your home language is, your mother tongue is, because then I would be able to like connect with people on a deeper level, you know? Yeah. Why should I expect you to have to be like, okay, no, she's Zulu. Let me talk in Zulu, because if I speak in my tongue, already you can hear
it. It's a real thing. I have like 8,000 Zulu friends, and you know, the conversation always switches to Zulu, and I'm just, you know what I mean? But like the privilege comes from the fact that everyone knows I can speak it as well. So it's like, okay, Gabby, you know what I mean? Like, come on.
I think it's an issue of exposure, right?
Yeah.
Because I mean, if you think about it, the Zulus very much in the south, and I think you don't really get exposed to the other cultures. What I wanted to just tag on is I grew up in the township, right? I'm a township girl. And I think the township is a mix.
Where exactly?
At Ridgeville, Pretoria.
Okay.
Pretoria. So yeah. So I think the township, especially Pretoria, is a mixed pot, right, of all cultures, people from different cultures, and I think how I grew up. I mean, I identify with some of the stuff that you said, but for us is that. We almost have our own Pitori culture, you know, and we almost have our Pitori language, you know, reverse Pitori, where it's almost like a mix of all the languages that are there where people are settling, and we got exposed to everyone. And I mean, when I grew up, you didn't really know what culture somebody was until they went to school. And you would figure out if they went to a Zulu school and you'd be like, oh, then there must be Zulu, or if they went to a Sotho school, there must be Sotho. But we just identified with ourselves as, you know, people from Pretoria. And I think there's also around evolution of cultures, because sometimes we form subcultures which might not have anything to do with whether you're Zulu, Tsonga, or Pedi. They're just the cultures of where you are and the identity that you've created as a person of that area.
That's a nice thing.
Yeah, but I think that's so interesting because, you know, I'm speaking about being Changani, but you're actually speaking about being from Pretoria. So that's like a geographical thing, right? And I think with the Amapiano genre, like Pretoria and just that culture is taking over. I think right now it's the hot thing in South Africa, right? Like it's become a dialect. Right, it's the thing that you show it's the language that you speak to show that you're a part of a culture, you know what's happening. So you have people like Focalistic and who else is like, well, I'm only thinking of Focalistic, like Hasentrap, right? What?
Hasentrap,
right? Yeah. It's kind of like it's a real cultural moment for music and Pretoria, because we haven't had any any really powerful brands like repping that kind of culture in a geographical setting.
I think it speaks to evolution, and I think that's maybe, I mean, when I was thinking about preparing for this talk, and I was thinking about culture, is that culture evolves, right? It doesn't stay stagnant. And I think sometimes we make mistakes of thinking, you know, just because I'm a Tsonga girl, you want me to wear shibelani and walk barefoot and do all the stuff that Tsonga people did 100 years ago. But it has evolved, right? Tsonga girls don't do that anymore. Tsonga girls do other things, you know what I'm saying? So I think culture evolves because culture is about a common identity that we create as we find ourselves in a certain space. So if you found yourself in Guyana, you would have a common identity and you would do things a certain way. But then when you find yourself in Pitori, you do different things and you have a culture that evolves. And I feel like our culture also have to evolve to also demonstrate the times that we're living in, right? Because I think sometimes especially older people will be like, oh, but you have to do this because it's your culture, or that is your culture, or that is your culture, but it might not be relevant to the world that I'm living in today.
Geographically though, it's so true, because I grew up in Soweto, and there's a difference between Zulus in Gauteng and Zulus in KZN.
True.
Like, my word, I get stereotyped by my own culture because I don't come from KZN specifically. Like, there's always just some, you're not Zulu enough, you don't have, like, you don't go back home, Amakai or whatever, like the whole thing. And it's just like, it's not really the best feeling, I guess, because it's like you're taking away a piece of me, my identity, just because I grew up in a different setting, just because I grew up with a different group. I didn't necessarily experience what those people did in KZN, or I don't hold the same values that they do in KZN. So it's a bit weird. It's a bit weird because whenever I do talk to someone who's Zulu, and then I'm like, oh no, I'm from Gauteng, you can see the face change, and it's like,
What, does it not make you Zulu enough?
Yeah. In their eyes.
Because you're not from.
In their eyes.
Yeah.
It doesn't. So it's just like, okay, well, I guess I don't know what you want me to say. I can't change anything about it. I'm here now, and at least I do know my culture. And no one, even if I didn't necessarily speak in Zulu, no one can come and say you're not Zulu. Like, they have no ground to stand on, really.
Yeah, speaking about I heard you say, stereotype by your own culture thing. That's something I've experienced so much. I was born in India and then I grew up here in South Africa. So I think one important thing, I'm not sure if it's the same for everybody else here, but accents is a huge thing, huge part of the culture, especially for me as an Indian. I grew up here in South Africa, so up until grade 6 I was here, so I had a very strong South African accent. So anytime you talk to somebody, especially like an older generation of somebody who's Indian, there's always that sort of, like, you can see it. It's like, oh, you grew up here, like you don't really know what you're talking about. So I think that's where I kind of learned to, change my accent. Like, so when I speak to people who are, like, especially the older generation of Indian, I will sort of tone down my accent. I'll speak in a more Indian accent, whatever that is.
Yeah.
And just to make myself, like, fit in and make myself relatable, whether it's comfortable for me or comfortable for them. Either way, it sort of cuts down that, oh, you're different from me kind of conversation. Like, oh, you don't know what you're talking about because you grew up outside of India, so don't come here kind of thing. And I find myself doing that quite often because in grade 6 I moved to Seattle.
Wow.
And the accent is crazy. The whole first year I spent just fixing my accent to fit an American accent, and I guess that kind of stuck now. But if you truly speak to me a lot more, you kind of like hear, oh, she doesn't really know like a specific accent. She's speaking in so many. Yeah. A lot of people think I'm faking it, but I'm really not. It's sort of become a thing in my subconscious. Like, okay, I'm speaking to these kind of people, so I should, to make myself relatable, I should speak like this. So I just thought the stereotype thing.
It does a lot. Like,
yeah.
It really does.
Yeah.
It's not just from people outside your family, within as well.
Yeah,
like
exactly.
the older generation.
Yeah.
Whoa. Like my mom has my siblings, they speak in English. So anytime we go back home and they try to conversate in Zulu, they can hear you, of course. They just won't respond in Zulu. And then it'd be like, so you didn't teach the kids Zulu. Why are they Zulu?
Yeah.
Why are they speaking in Zulu? It's just like, they can hear you.
Yeah.
It's not a case of they don't know Zulu. They just respond in a language they're comfortable in.
Yeah.
And and it just so happens to be English.
Yeah.
But now you can't now scrutinize the kids, make them feel awkward or as if,
Yeah.
go sort of with it now.
Yeah.
We're trying to conversate in Zulu. And the sad part is, it doesn't just stay with them, because I also find myself acting a certain way as well.
Yes.
And then it's like, whoa, I am literally becoming what I feared. Whoa.
But I think the language one, I suppose, is one of the more difficult ones, right? Because a lot of people believe that language is how you hold your culture is through your language. And unfortunately, we've seen English as a language that is spoken by most people, like we're having this conversation in English. But I think there is, a need, I suppose, to preserve some of our languages. And unfortunately, with how things are going, the globalization, we're trying to prepare children for the world. You're thinking about your children, they probably won't stay in South Africa, they might go to Seattle, they must go anywhere else. And, having English is an advantage for them. But unfortunately, in doing that, we are losing some of our language, and our language might get lost over time if we don't preserve them somehow. So I get where some people might be coming from in terms of trying to preserve languages, because that's how you preserve culture.
Yeah. I didn't think of it that way. I just felt scrutinized half the time. It's just a language. But when you think about it on a deeper level, there's more weight to it. It's not just about me, it's about just preserving a culture that's been there for years and years and years and years.
Yeah. Because I think, as I've said, as we evolve, as we become more global, we still need to remember our cultures, because this is where we started from, and you shouldn't have one culture overpower another one, where other cultures become, not so fashionable anymore. So I think those kind of cultural preservation mechanisms are important, and I think as South Africans we don't do enough of that, of trying to preserve our cultures, so that people will know, this is how we started, and it could be part of our history.
Can we touch on gender roles as well in culture, and how you guys, as specifically women, view them, and where do you think they're going now in that sense?
Gender roles, I think, is one of those things that is actually not culturally specific, because it doesn't matter what culture you're looking at, women are always at the bottom of the males. Somehow the males of the world have been able to agree on that, right? In any culture that you look at, the women are, they're, I don't know, exactly. So I think women can agree. Generally, from what I see, women in most cultures are not like the first citizens, I would say.
Is there even any culture that kind of promotes like feminism, like a sense of individuality for the woman?
I think culture is, like, for me as a Hindu, like I'm putting religion now. As a Hindu, women are, like, there's so many powerful women, goddesses, like we pray to many gods, not just one. So women religiously, I think, are, even though they're seen as powerful, they're independent, I think it's culture that sort of brings it down. Like I don't know much about the whole patriarchy thing, but I think it's the point where women are brought down and sort of, I guess, subdued is, I think, due to culture over religion. So I think it's become a common thing among many cultures, even though it's not part of the religion.
Wait, are you saying that your experience has been that culture agrees more on having women being subordinate,
exactly,
as opposed to your religion,
exactly,
where deities are actually
pray to?
Yeah. Okay.
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly.
That's
you
super.
said so
No, that's super interesting, because my culture is also deeply Christian, right?
Yeah.
And When I was growing up, it was kind of like celebrated, like womanhood is celebrated from a Christian perspective, but then there's also like Black patriarchal culture. And what I mean by that is that the roles are actually reversed. So like for me, Black patriarchal culture has been about making sure that, okay, let me put it this way. I hope my mom doesn't see this, right? But like, I have something to say. So like when I was growing up, I'm actually coming to terms with this like in my very early 30s, okay? So like when I was growing up, like my vision of womanhood and what I was told to enact or like model as a woman is a performance, right? That like if you're trying to get picked by a man, if you want security, marriage, right, children, and the prestige of being chosen by a man, you have to perform a particular kind of womanhood. It must be like super high quality, you know, self-abandon, and just perform, appease, put your back into it, and until like, you know what I mean, like you're absolutely, until you lose yourself, right? So that's kind of like the standard. And I think we see this in a lot of like Black patriarchal culture, as well as that single mothers and women are like hyper independent, right? Because some things happen like in the relationship between Black women and Black men. So that's like Black patriarchal culture. But in my Christianity, because I'm a Christian, there's nothing more glorious than being a woman, because I have a different kind of model for what it means to be a woman, right? So as someone who believes in Jesus being God, there's a beautiful union that happens between him and his church that we call the bride, right? And so she's a prized possession. In fact, she's priceless. But I've kind of had to learn to separate myself from a culture that is non-religious, that says that you're supposed to perform and appease in order to have the highest value, right? And kind of move and gravitate toward, which has kind of been a natural, right? Like it's very hard to be like a soft, feminine, and I think vulnerable Black woman. You know what I mean? Like we come from like, I'm not a feminist, you know what I mean? But like, it's like, I feel like it's expected for me to like just constantly, you know, just, and most times I don't want to do that. I'm actually super
bored.
Nice.
Maybe 2 seconds.
Yeah, like you have to, but I'm not like that. And I think, like I'm saying, it was an unlearning that, oh, to be a woman does not mean to be a man. You know, and I think that's the culture that we live in right now, is that like women, I think because of like a deep disappointment with men, have taken on male qualities and kind of like compounded it onto a femininity that they've never even discovered.
But which are male qualities? Do you believe in the whole male quality, female quality
That's the
story?
thing, right? And that's powerful, because I believe it's a human thing. Qualities are all human. I think that men, because men are not women and women are not men, men have more testosterone, and in general, men are drawn to things, men are more logical, men are more rational. It's literally a biological thing. Women, because we have ovaries, or we have the chromosomes, and we have more hormones, estrogen, progesterone, all those things, right? We're different from men. We have a different makeup because of what we have in our bodies that allows us to carry children and stuff like that. But I was with my brother yesterday, and he said to me, you should have been a man, because the way we play is kind of aggressive. But aggression is very natural to me, but I had to learn as a child that it's not good for a woman to be, I don't even think aggressive, I think the word is assertive. Yes. Right, that as a woman, you can't say what it is that you think. You have to kind of wait to, you know, for a man to run the show, and then you kind of go along with it. But it's always been easy for me to say, no, I think you're doing it wrong, and not to like shame you. I think this is the way of doing it. So there's actually, I don't really believe in typically male qualities or women qualities. I think that human beings have a mesh of them, but society kind of like places them in these boxes where you can't jump out of, because we're saying men are only strong, right? We don't associate men with love, but men are very loving.
So I think it's super interesting what you're saying, because you've touched on a few things, right? And I mean, there's a lot of theories around how the society perceives the feminine and the masculine. And I think also you spoke about maybe genetically or hormones and stuff like that, which people think it might be true.
Yeah.
But there is no evidence to suggest that just because I'm a woman, my hormones make me less rational. You know what I'm saying? So it's those things that subconsciously we are taught as we grow. Even as small children, you have the pink and the blue. The girls wear pink, the boys wear blue. The boys are encouraged, the boys are encouraged to be rough, to take risks. The girls are expected to be communal, to be nice, to smile, to be seen and not heard. And those things are actually taught. They're not things that are natural to us. They're taught to us, and we believe that we should do that. And they start to show up later in life, in our relationships, and also in the workplace, right? Because in the workplace, I'm a corporate woman. I'm a leader where I work, but people expect you to be a certain way as a woman. You can't lead as well as a man, or if you do something. And then there's also the penalty that women suffer if you don't conform to what people think you should be. If you're not soft, feminine, communal, then you get a penalty, like, why are you trying to be a man? You know what I'm saying? So there's a price to pay. And I think hopefully, and I'm very hopeful of the generation that I see here, because I see you guys breaking down those binary gender roles in many ways, right? You guys are like, gender is not, I had a conversation with my daughter and she's like, gender is not two, there's a lot in between. And I'm hoping as we break down those roles, we will also be able to break down, like, be who you are. You don't have to do things because you're a girl or do things because you're a boy. Do things because this is what feels authentic to you.
Yeah. I want to know what you think. You have to say everything on everything we've talked about. The next 10 minutes are yours.
Yeah, so with like the whole binary and non-binary, I'm obviously very, very much with the whole LGBTQI plus community. Like, I support them fully. But with the whole like boys only wear blue and girls only wear pink, I feel like, why can't everyone just wear every color? Why do we have to have a specific color to a specific gender? It's also with the boys' toys. It's like boys can only grow up playing with construction toys or like cars. I grew up playing with cars because I liked it, but then I was considered a tomboy because I'm a girl. But to be honest, why is that like, gender, why is there like such a strict like gender role for each like thing? So why can't we just have like, say, girls can play with this and boys can play with Barbie dolls? Why does it all have to be pink for girls and blue for boys, or construction for boys? And it's like also with women can't go into construction working because we're not seen as strong enough. Which
How did you grow up? Like, what's your like cultural reference?
Well, I'm adopted, so I'm Irish, Scottish, Welsh, South African. I've got the whole mix. My dad, he was born in South Africa, but his mom and dad immigrated from Ireland.
Okay.
So they came over here, and I was kind of taught by my dad and my mom to like, I was very much told to be inclusive and to accept people around me. So I was never like racist or like homophobic to people, because I was always taught to like be inclusive to other people, because you never know what their past is, or you never know how they grew up. So I've always put myself, forward and open to hearing about other people's cultures and learning and wanting to experience other people's cultures and wanting to understand more about them.
Yeah. Now, I'm actually really interested in like your like unique perspective in being adopted. Like how does that actually shape your understanding of what it means to be you?
To be honest, being adopted to me, it's never like been part of my personality. Because my parents have
they told me from the get-go that I was adopted. So it was never a big secret in our household.
Yeah.
Even my brothers are adopted.
Okay.
So it's always been like an open thing, and it's not part of me. I've never said, no, I'm adopted and that's who I am.
Yeah.
I've kind of put it aside and I've made myself into someone who's, my mom and dad or my mom and dad.
Yeah.
They might not be my birth parents, but they're still my parents.
And so to wrap up, what would each of you say culture, heritage, and tradition means to you?
Look, culture is whatever society at a particular time believes is what's working, makes sense, is relevant, and actually gives meaning to life at that time, right? So I don't really pay attention to culture or follow it as... Okay, let me put it this way. I think more critically about culture because I can talk about my traditional, culture of being Tsonga, but also I live in a world which has a culture of its own, right? And I think like being African, being black, there's a black African culture that is like pervasive in our world. Social media and all of these platforms are all purveyors of a particular kind of culture. So like, if I had to, just transpose it into like the 21st century, and I don't know if anyone here listens to like Kendrick Lamar, right? But like his new album has a song called The Heart Part 5. And he critiques culture. So culture is not like all the great stuff. It's also the terrible stuff that we glorify. He critiques the fact that the culture today is promiscuity. The culture today is black people murdering each other, And he uses Marvin Gaye's I Want You, which is a song about unrequited love. So he's actually singing about unrequited love between him and his hood and him and his culture. So his culture does not give him back the love that he wants because he disagrees with it, right? So like a really powerful critique of the fact that a lot of the things that we call culture actually don't work for us. And so I'm like a I know culture's out there and I think it's real and I actually can't even escape it. I think like things like my hairstyle and the fact that I wear makeup and I'm wearing a Kenyan like Maasai cloth, that is all part of, I'm wearing Reeboks, you know what I mean? It's a culture that we all live in. But I think everyone has to, in this world that we live in right now, I think get back to some centered truth around what is the culture that we live in right now and is it really working for all of us, right? So yeah, that's just me, that's my take on culture.
My take on culture, as a white person in South Africa, to be honest, I'm just white.
Ooh.
For me, I just feel like I'm white. We came in not knowing, and my culture point of view is that I'm white.
Yeah.
I don't really have a culture as such. I might, but to me, I don't seem like I have one.
Really?
Yeah, I don't know why.
You do have a culture.
What do
It's
you
a
mean?
culture.
The whole world is your culture. The
A
world.
culture is about the values and a language that you have. It doesn't mean, because I think sometimes when you say culture, people think, it means like African culture, what you dress, whatever. But
Yeah.
being who you are is a culture that you are dealing with.
Yeah.
So you do have a culture.
Okay.
I don't. Like this question has me a bit like what's the word when you don't know what to say? Speechless. Yes. Because I've never really thought about how I view culture, what culture means to me, or all of that. Because it's genuinely just who I am, I guess. I've never tried separating it and being like, what's culture? It's always just been like, you know what? This is how I grew up. This is the journey. I've never really thought about it. It's just, it feels like an internal battle sometimes because there are certain things that I just couldn't agree with, and the things that I didn't believe in, and things like, what's this thing? Witchcraft. It took me a minute to feel like that thing is real. It took me a minute to feel like, I used to think my mom was making all of this in her head, and she just wanted reasons and excuses to just blame life struggles on something. So I thought witchcraft was that thing where it's like, okay, you know what, the TV broke, but Louis, this is happening. No, I thought it was that situation until there were just certain things that seemed more spiritual than a man could explain or understand, you know, like deeper than just, no, the TV broke and this is that. Like, I started seeing it and I started understanding, okay, you know what, maybe they're just higher things about me that I am not aware of, but I can't necessarily say they aren't there just because I don't see it, or it's not necessarily a thing of she ran and sat on the table and ran out. You know, it doesn't have to necessarily be a full front thing for me to be like, actually, there could be something that's just greater than me that I have no understanding of, but I can't dismiss it. So I guess I'd say it's about learning, accepting who you are, accepting who others are, you know, and I try not to having an open mind, basically. I actually would change that about my culture. A lot of people in my culture are very stubborn. So having an open mind would help also embrace a lot of different people as well, because we ourselves are different. I guess that's my take.
I don't know. I'm happy I'm fourth because I kind of had some time to think about it. For me, culture, I know some people talked about how culture is what you're doing now, like the world now. For me, it's more of the past. For me, it's people connecting myself to, and I know you said ancestors are important. It's for me, it's connecting myself to the people who came before me. It's keeping those values and those traditions alive. And yes, there's some good things. Yes, there's some bad things. But I don't know. For me, I think I can pick the stuff that I want to represent. Sometimes there's not going to be a choice. Sometimes you're not able to pick. Sometimes it's part of the culture. But I think that's when it boils down to the person. Like, you get to choose whether you want to be that person or whether you want to still change but still keep those values alive. So I think it's important to, for me, it helps me decide who I am.
Yeah, very much aligned to what you're saying. I think culture is a form of identity.
Yeah.
That's how we identify with a group of people, right, that we belong to. And obviously culture is a lot of things, right? You've got them, you know, on a superficial level, which is like the artifacts of culture, which is like what you wear, what you dress, the traditions that you do. But I think underlying all those artifacts is a value system that we buy into, and a lot of cultures are all around creating a value system for common understanding, for understanding of how we solve problems as a culture, you know, how we raise our children, how we live with each other is the basis of that culture. So for me, that's what it is. It's about identity, it's about the values, and about the community that we want to raise, and also the evolution with the times. Like you say, it's almost like a connection to the people who came before us, and to realize that they did things certain ways because of the times that they were living in. And there's some things we can learn and take from that, but there's some things that might not be useful to us because we live in different times. But, you know, just to honor our culture, because at the end of the day, we're all standing on the shoulders of giants, right? The next generation stands on the shoulder of the other generation as we move our generations forward.